Hi, I'm Sarah Levis, Marketing Manager at Small Business Solver, and this is how to write an awesome email. Thank you for joining me today. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. With the rise in popularity of smartphones and communication technology they make available to us, it's tempting to believe that email is on the way out. However, a recent Forbes article indicates that email is still in use, particularly in the corporate world, and that it isn't going away, as you can see from the stats on the screen. As a small business owner, and even as someone who sends email for personal reasons, it's worth taking a bit of time to learn how to make your email as effective as possible so that it's memorable for all the right reasons. We're going to learn all of this on the job, so to speak, with a fun and educational task. I'm a small business owner myself. My very small freelancing business is called Running Steps, and today we're going to look at an email that I wrote for my mailing list about a hypothetical seminar that I'm hiring Small Business Solver co-founder Carla Langhorst to do in September in my purely hypothetical boardroom. We'll learn about the art of writing an awesome email as we take the average email that I wrote, examine it for issues, and correct the ones that we find, shaping it into something truly worthy for release into the wilds of the World Wide Web. And then you'll be ready to write awesome emails of your own. The issues that we'll be considering are tone, potential edits, call to action, tools, checking for spelling and grammar, writing a subject, appropriate greeting, who to CC, and the importance of following the spam laws for your country. But before we even get into that, before you write an email, you need to ask yourself, do I need to write this email? For some situations, an email is entirely appropriate and very useful, and for some, it's not such a great idea. Particularly in a corporate situation, you want to be sure before you send. It all comes down to, is an email the best way to communicate what you need to say? Email is appropriate when you've got a short and easily conveyed message, preferably 100 words, with a clear call to action. The reader should know after reading the email exactly what you need him or her to do. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. Email is also good if you need to get a message or a document to a large group of people at once, or a link to a document that you've stored in a cloud application, as some people don't like to open attachments. An email is also great for spreading time-sensitive information to a large number of people as quickly as possible, such as a message to your team that a meeting has been canceled at the last minute. Email is very useful, but not always appropriate. There are some corporate situations in which you shouldn't send an email or probably even write it, because sometimes emails do get accidentally sent. If you're angry about a work situation, whether it's something that's happened with a coworker or a customer, don't email anyone about it when you're still upset. It's too easy to put something that you'll regret into writing and that could come back on you later. That sounds like common sense, but many people learn this lesson the hard way. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're about to email confidential information on a public or otherwise unsecured network, like your personal phone or your personal computer, think twice about that. Protecting confidential information is very important nowadays, especially now that data breaches are becoming more and more common. You need to keep customers' trust. So keep confidential information to lines that you know are secured, or leave it out of your email, just to be safe. The third bullet is a purely practical suggestion. If you know that an email is going to cause questions and multiple follow-up emails, sometimes it's easier and more expedient to pick up the phone to discuss the issue or arrange a face-to-face meeting so that you can deal with everything in one shot. It doesn't seem like it will save time, but when you factor in all the time that you'll use writing emails back and forth and waiting for a person to respond, it ultimately does save time. Finally, sometimes an email just isn't the most appropriate way to communicate a message, regardless of whether the reader is a personal or a business contact. Send your coworker condolences on their loved one's death with a handwritten card. If you're in a group email and discussion is getting heated between you and another person, take it offline before nastiness starts to dominate everyone's inbox, because people don't need to see that. Sometimes email just isn't the best way. But if you've decided that an email is necessary, prepare yourself before writing by deciding its purpose. Ask yourself, what do I need the reader to do? American veteran and former J.P. Morgan Vice President Kabir Sehgal has adopted the military practice of putting a notation letting the reader know both what the email's purpose is and his expectation of the reader right in the subject. And this is a useful way to decide what kind of email you're going to need. Do you need the reader to take some sort of action that you're going to outline in the email? Do you need a signature? Are you just doing some info sharing and don't necessarily even need a reply? Are you looking for a decision from the reader or making a request for permission or approval? Or are you looking to coordinate with the reader on something? Even if you don't want to adopt the practice of using the notation in the subject line, the idea of considering the purpose of your email before you start to write it is useful, because the tone of a request email might sound very different than that of an action email, and both of these will be very different than those of an info email. Speaking of tone, tone gets its own section of slides because it's not just what you say in an email, it's how you say it. And that's not just a truism, it's very important, because you can easily come across in a way that you didn't intend to in an email without realizing it. With that in mind, let's talk about striking that important balance in your emails between business and folksy, because especially with customers, either extreme isn't good. I write a lot of customer emails. I've been in customer service for a while. I like talking to customers. I like helping them get their needs met. I've learned that generally, there are always exceptions, of course. They don't like really formal language or feeling like they're being talked down to, nor do they like an overly solicitous, let's be best friends approach. But I don't think that you have to use either of those to come across as friendly, polite, and interested in your customers while maintaining a professional air with good boundaries. I've worked a lot with how to come across to customers, and I generally use an email with a variation in tone like this. It seems to get good results, and here's what I believe does the trick. A pleasant, appropriate greeting with a little bit of small talk, and not a lot, just something to open, maybe about the weather or something that you know is going on in the person's life. Copy that conveys a general sense that you're interested in the person and interacting more with them, and letting them know that they can initiate that contact if they desire, and how to do it, and a signature with your role and your contact info. You appear interested, but not pushy, concerned for their well-being and letting them know that you're there for them, but not in a terribly creepy way. Like I said, this gets good results for me, but you should experiment with what tone of email gets the best results for you with your customers. Your ultimate goal for writing email should be that it leaves as little room for misinterpretation and misunderstanding as possible. So your tone should match your words. And you should also avoid using conventions that have a high chance of muddling your message. And that's really what this slide is about, because certain writing conventions can potentially hurt more than they help when they're used in email. And that's not just because they're generally considered unprofessional, but because they're difficult to interpret as text, and because they assume a fluency in ways of communicating that readers might not possess for any number of reasons: cultural, age-related, and I'm going to add lifestyle to that and use myself as an example, in that I only got a smartphone a couple of years ago. So when compared to other people my age, I'm behind in what, say, emojis mean. I don't realize what a lot of them mean, and I don't tend to use them. And I don't tend to use text speak either, because I haven't texted a lot. When you look at the first point on this slide, realize that we rely on contextual cues like tone of voice and gestures in facial expressions for cues on how to identify and respond to things like sarcasm and teasing and exaggeration. That's something that you really have to be in person to get. And attempts to use these things in email may leave readers wondering what we mean or how to take those words, or may leave them feeling very insulted or offended. So if you can't be there in person, best not to use them. Best not to use them in text, so that where they can be misinterpreted very easily. Going back to text speak. My 70-year-old father uses text speak in his emails, and I have no idea where he picked that up. And I can barely figure out what he's saying sometimes, because I don't have that fluency in text speak. And I put up with it from my father because he's my father. But I'd probably disregard marketing emails that use it. And that's the takeaway for email marketers especially. Be positive that your tone and the conventions you employ are ones that a given audience is going to respond to, or you risk alienating them or having them ignore your email, or worse, unsubscribe from your email newsletters. And I want to comment a little bit more on emojis, because not only do people find them unprofessional in business emails, if you must use them, I'd be very, very careful about doing it, because some of them have multiple meanings. And something that looks very innocent might have a meaning that's absolutely not. So you don't want to put something in your email and then realize later that that you've put something with a meaning that you absolutely didn't intend to be there, and that somebody got really offended by. So if you must use emojis, be aware of what you're representing when you include it in an email, or what you're potentially representing. Let's look at the email that I drafted for our fun little task today. This is a draft of the email that I'd like to send to my mailing list for my my hypothetical event with Carla. I'm a writer by trade, so I'm always going to want to edit stuff, especially stuff that I wrote. And I deliberately wrote this email with some fluff in it so I could show you the difference that a good edit can make. I've already started the editing process, and I've color-coded it so you can see what I'm doing. Red indicates weak words or phrases that could be omitted or replaced with stronger language. The orangish color indicates spots where 2 or 3 words could probably be expressed in one. And blue indicates business jargon that should be expressed more clearly or explained for people that are coming in and may not know what it means. Now, this email doesn't really need much of an edit. It's not much longer than 150 words, and it could easily be could easily get it below that by tightening up the language. But as we start to look at editing, consider that any changes you make during editing, whether it's an email or a research paper or that novel you finally decided to write, should clarify your message. Don't go chopping just for the sake of chopping. You're aiming for clarity. I know that it looks like I've done chopping for the sake of chopping in this edit, but there is a method to my madness here. White words are from the original email. Green crossed out words are what I cut, and yellow words are ones that I added or changed. So we're just further along in the original edit that I started. And you'll see that despite me adding some material to explain some jargon when I didn't feel that I had any other option, the email is almost 30 words shorter. That's a lot for an email this size, and I really didn't do anything that difficult or really not that obvious. I cut filler words like very and often because they don't really contribute anything, they just sit there. I cut unnecessary clauses and created shorter, tighter sentences. And in a few places, I replaced 2 weaker adjectives with 1 more dynamic one. And look at the difference it made. Taking your writing apart like this takes some practice, but it's really worth it, especially if you're in sales. After all, you're competing for busy people's attention, so you want your message to be strong, compact, and well-written. You want it to make an impact. So there's our email, and it's got stuff going for it. It's 150 words. The business terms are defined for people who don't know them. The essential information is there. But the little guy at the bottom is still looking confused. And I'm wondering if there's maybe a problem with our call to action. There is a call to action, and that's great because every email should have a call to action. But I'm wondering if that's maybe the weakness that we still have. And really, it is. It's if you take a look at it, it's not clear enough because a person who doesn't know my company, like who doesn't know Running Steps, is going to finish this email not knowing what to do next. If I don't know where the office is or who Farah is or how to contact her, I can't tell her that I want to attend the seminar. It'd also be nice to know the methods that I can use to pay with cash or with a check or what, and by what dates I have to have all this tied up in order to attend. Now, for some people, the lack of clarity isn't a problem. If they're really interested in the seminar, they'll find a way to get the information that they need. For people who are already on the fence about whether they come to this seminar or whether they want to stay home and watch 90 Day Fiancé, are just as likely to say, if they can't be bothered to tell me everything I need to know in the email, I can't be bothered to show up. And you've lost them. Luckily, this call to action is easily fixed. A revised call to action serves our purposes much better. Cost $25, RSVP to Office Manager Farah Bean by September 13th, and there's Farah's email. This is a much stronger call to action because it tells you who Farah is and how to contact her if you want to attend the seminar, the date by which you need to do so, and the cost of the seminar. And the pressure's off to provide any other information in this call to action because Farah can get that to people who are actually interested and need to know details about how to pay and when they actually contact her and say, I'm interested in coming. Instead of cluttering up the more general email that's going out to everybody, including people that aren't going to attend and therefore don't care about any of that. I don't have an office assistant. Farah Bean is my cat's name. And she'd make a terrible office assistant. She's totally scatterbrained and kind of a brat, but don't tell her I said so. So this is our updated email. And as you can see, when we replace the call to action, we shave a few more words off. And that doesn't just appeal to the editor in me. It appeals to the marketer in me too. If you're still struggling to see the value of this, realize that more and more people are looking at their email on their phones. Even on the larger models, the screen is small, and the more compact the message, the more likely they are to read all of it. So the takeaway here is that it pays to learn to write well and develop an editor's eye, because that will serve you all well in all areas of your career where you're doing writing, not just writing email. Regardless of which email platform you're using, whether it's Outlook or Gmail or a tool that's been specially built for your company, you've got simple to use tools at your disposal to make your emails look more professional. There's not enough time to get into the nuts and bolts of how to use them, but they pretty much work the same way across all platforms. And if you look at the last bullet point, I found you some training about Outlook and Gmail, and both of those are very comprehensive at covering, these things that can, covering what I've mentioned in the rest of the slide. I realized that you can't link to those things. You can't access those links. So what I've done is in the blog post for this webinar that's up on the site, the links to everything that I've referred to in the site are also there, so that you can easily go and access those resources. So be sure to go and look at that. So looking at the first bullet point, make your links look cleaner and classier by making the name of the destination web page the link, instead of just copying the URL into your email. Once you start doing this, you'll see that it's only a couple of more steps and it looks infinitely more professional. And number next, watch for the squiggly lines that indicate a spelling or grammar error as you're writing. They don't show up on the PowerPoint slides when it's in display mode, but they actually do show up when I'm writing there too. I've highlighted them to show the deliberate errors that I made in this slide. But you'll be able to see your errors, correct them as you go along so that you don't forget to correct them before you send the email and end up looking unprofessional because you've sent an email with spelling errors that could have been easily fixed. If you use even the free version of Grammarly, you can catch even more of your errors. I use the professional version of Grammarly, and it's just a lifesaver. If you find yourself writing repetitive bits in your email, like paragraphs introducing yourself or your company, use quick parts in Outlook or the Gmail equivalent to make it into a pre-formatted block of text that you can save and easily insert into any email. I use this all the time, and it saves me a ton of time. Similarly, using the signature tool to design yourself a nicely formatted sign-off with your name, your position, ways of contacting you, and other information that spam laws dictate you need to include for you email marketers that aren't using a service like MailChimp. It saves you time and typing while letting you do some marketing. Because why not include links to your company's website and your social media accounts in your signature as well? And if you have that saved, and like the quick parts, you can just drop it in at the end of the email. You're not typing it out over and over again every time you write an email. So these tools are there, and you should make good use of them. Again, those links are in the blog post. Go check it out. I'm going to go back to Spellcheck and Grammar Check for a bit because this is tricky. People often assume that if a piece of email does a clean run through the Spellcheck, it must be fine. But even if your email has no Spellcheck error lines in it, read it through before you send it, because if you're just relying on Spellcheck to catch errors, you might miss the fact that the first sentence on this slide has 1, 2, 3 errors in it. See what I did there? In fact, read your own email out loud. You're more likely to catch errors. Better yet, read it out loud backwards. It's a proofreading trick, and you're even more likely to catch errors. And if it's a very important email or a very important document, you can use these tricks with anything that you're writing. Have someone else look at it, because it's very easy to miss errors if it's a piece of writing that you've been very close to. The takeaway is, don't rely exclusively on Spellcheck, because it will miss spelling errors that are words, like trial and trail, that if you got them reversed, it's still going to look weird in your email or your document, and it's going to miss homophones. And the little guy in the picture is going, homo what? Because he doesn't think he knows what a homophone is. And you might not think that you know what it is either. And even if the definition down here still makes it sound as clear as mud to you, I guarantee that you've had experience with these and you know what they are, because anyone that says that they haven't been tripped up on one is lying. We've all had experiences where we have used the wrong your, or the wrong to, or the wrong there, or the wrong it. These are all homophobe words that sound the same, but they're spelled differently and they mean different things. And it's amazing how many emails I've gotten from professional people that have used the wrong, this one especially, the tos or the theirs or the it. So watch out for those. Watch out for those tricky ones, and read through your emails, or have someone read them through for you to make sure that you're not missing things that the spell checker hasn't caught. We're almost done. Subjects. Again, this is a tricky one, and it doesn't feel like it should be, but it is, because of phones, we have to make subjects shorter. They should be less than 50 characters, because people are looking at them on their phones, and anything more than 50 characters, you risk the subject being cut off, and that's not something you want. So in those 50 characters, you have to you have to tell people what the email is about, and you have to give them an idea of what you're going to expect for them, and that's a pretty tall order for something that's under 50 characters, which is why I like the idea of those military notations, and why I used one of them, info, in the 3 potential subjects that I came up with for our email. And once I came up with those, I wrote test emails for each of them, and I sent all of those emails to test addresses that I've created in both Outlook and Gmail to see where they end up once I send them. And I was really happy, because all 3 of those ended up front and center in inbox, right where I wanted them to. Not off in promotions or social or other, or God forbid, spam. And this is a good practice to get into, because having your email land in the reader's primary inbox right in front of your eyes is the goal. So go off. If you don't have a Gmail account, or you don't have a Outlook account, they're free to create. Create yourself email addresses so that you can test your subject lines and see where they end up. Because doing these test runs gives you a chance to change a subject and see if you can get it to land where you want it to. You can revise and try again, write, revise, and test and try again until your email ends up front and center inbox. I'm going to save you some time with that, though. I've learned partly from research and partly from my own experience that email with these words in the subject will likely end up, best case scenario, in an area of an inbox designated for promotions or notifications for social media, which people are less likely to look at, or worst case scenario, in the spam folder, where it might be deleted before anyone ever sees it. And this isn't an exhaustive list of the words that might trigger this action. So email marketers especially should familiarize themselves with the sorts of words and phrases that they should leave out of subject lines. And I've linked to an article in the blog post about that with a much larger list of the words that you should avoid. And we're almost there, I promise. Before you send, just some final touches and things to consider before we send off our emails. We need a greeting, which should always be someone's name if you know it. But what if you don't? Or like in our scenario, our email is going out to a long list of people. Good morning, good afternoon, something friendly like that is fine. Introduce yourself if you don't know the person, or remind them of who you are if you've had limited contact with them. If you really need to CC someone, go ahead and do it, because sometimes people do need to be in on these conversations and do need to be monitoring what's happening. But remember, we're all dealing with too much email. Ask yourself who needs to be in on the conversation and act accordingly, respecting the time and inboxes of people who don't need to be involved, and respecting the privacy of the person that the email is about. If you're sending an email about an issue to a company about an issue that needs to be dealt with, you want it to stay with. You don't want it to go to everybody in the company. You'd rather the least number of people possible saw your information. So respect the privacy of the person you're dealing with too. The last bullet is for email marketers. Make sure you're in accordance not only with the spam laws for your country, but with the GDPR regulations if you're doing email marketing in the European Union, because you are bound to those now, no matter where you are in the world. If you've got clients in the European Union, you have to follow those laws if you're marketing to them. And I'm going to put up a link in the blog post to some information about that. So this is our email with my greeting and the body, our call to action, a little bit of a signature. I would probably include some more information on how to contact me, but these slides aren't very big. There's not a lot of room on them. And I wanted to include this sentence at the bottom to give you an idea of what the CAN spam laws require you to include if you're doing email marketing. You have to tell them why they're getting the email. You opted in on our website. You have to give them a method to unsubscribe, and you have to provide a physical mailing address where you can reach you. And I haven't provided that because there wasn't enough room, but those are the bare requirements to be in compliance with Canada's spam laws. They might be different for your country, and you might want to research that. If you're working through a service like MailChimp, they're pretty good at designing footers that will help you be in compliance, but it's not a lot of work to research it and make sure that you're in compliance with yourself if you would just rather go through Outlook or Gmail. It's not that hard. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. This is my email. If you ever want to send me an awesome email with any questions or any concerns, and I will send you an awesome email back and do the best that I can to answer. And do check out the blog post. I'm going to link to it when I put this up on YouTube, and all the links that you need will be there. Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.